The Season 2 finale, It's a Fair, opens with the characters preparing, simply because the state fair is upon us. And so they're going to be closing the station a little bit early in order for the state fair. Mainly because Stacy is going to be participating in the fair by making a bunch of pies, and Schemer is going to be participating by making a pie flinger, where somebody can put their face in a hole, there's a little catapult, and pies them in the face. So, Billy and the kids are left in charge of Shining Time Station. And with the station being run by a bunch of children, it goes just about as well as you would think it would. But yeah, those are a whole bunch of different shenanigans. Weirdly enough, Schemer's plot actually seems to be going pretty well for him. Like, he makes a thing that can hit you in the face with a pie, and that machine works, and he's not doing anything malicious or evil or greedy. He's just making up pie people in the face machine for the state fair. Now, the real interesting part of this episode is when Mr. King shows up. Now, throughout this entire show, we have been seeing a running gag on Mr. King trying to find Mr. Conductor, but Mr. Conductor always manages to escape him, implying that him and Mr. Conductor are really good friends. Well, it turns out that Mr. King only met Mr. Conductor once when he was a very small child, as he tells to the kids. He was really young, and the train was late, and he didn't think he'd be getting home. Until Mr. Conductor shows by and tells him a poem. But Mr. King forgets half the poem because of how young he was. But when Mr. Conductor told him the poem, he knew that he'd be getting home safe. And he did. Afterwards, he knew that Shining Time Station was his home. And that is a very interesting lore drop for the character of Mr. King, because it does imply that maybe that's the reason he became superintendent of the Indian Valley Railway to begin with, so that he can find that strange little man again. Afterwards, Mr. Conductor does show up, but not to reveal himself to Mr. King, not yet. Instead, he shows Mr. King a video on the viewing machine, which shows just that. A little kid, lost in the train station, but eventually finds his way home. And after the video, Mr. King remembers the poem. It's actually a very sweet moment, and it's probably my favorite scene in this entire show that isn't from Thomas the Tank Engine. I've always really enjoyed the character of Mr. King, on how it's a very unrealistic point of view from like a billionaire, but it tugs at the heartstrings. This moment does. I don't know why I said that with like Yoda, but it's a good moment. But things, however, go astray when Stacy comes back and she puts her pies down, but Schemer ends up swapping the pies. That is probably the closest thing to a malicious thing the Schemer did in this entire episode, but in Schemer's defense, he sees a pie, and he didn't even know they were Stacy's to begin with, so he just took them. But, anyways, the kids are still freaking out because they're running Shining Time Station all by themselves and they have no idea what they're doing. And then afterwards, the band play a song. And so they all talk to Mr. Conductor, and then Mr. Conductor tells the only Thomas story of the episode. Yes, forgot Thomas the Tank was part of the show. And much like the Valentine's episode, this only has one Thomas segment, and it has fucking Trevor in it. I knew this episode was too good to be true. But anyway, the episode goes by, and then the mayor comes in because he's in charge of the pie eating contest for some reason. I don't know why they put the mayor in charge of that, but the mayor is in charge of it. And he tastes the pies that were laid out that are actually schemers, and they taste awful, which makes sense because they're meant to be thrown into someone's face and not to be eaten. However, Schemer throws the actual pies, Stacy's pies, into his face through his catapult, and the mayor, he actually really likes it. And so everybody comes inside with a bunch of dancers and acrobats and clowns and whatnot, all for the fair because the train was ready. And so season 2 of Shiny Time Station ends with Billy finally enjoying some peace and quiet at the railway before Mr. Conductor comes in as loud as possible on his brand new bike. But him and Mr. Conductor are tight, so it's okay. This episode was a lot of fun. I don't know if it works as a season finale outside of the whole Mr. King and Mr. Conductor arc, and it doesn't even get resolved at the end. They still have not reunited or met because, remember, those are different people from season 1 and season 2, but I still really enjoyed this episode, and it's very charming and pretty emotional at parts. And folks, that was Shiny Time Station Season 2. I'd like to end our discussion of the second season of Shiny Time Station by revisiting something that I discussed at the beginning. How big of a change was it from Shiny Time Station Season 1 to Shiny Time Station Season 2? The short answer is not as bad as I thought it would be. Well, let me explain. For those of you that are starting here for some reason, at the beginning of Season 1, I made the comparison to Matt and Tanya leaving and being replaced by Dan and Kara to Steve leaving Blue's Clues and being replaced by Joe, and how much of a huge change that was to the kids watching at home. After watching the entirety of Season 2, I can ultimately say that it is definitely not as bad as Steve leaving Blue's Clues. Oh my god, why did I even compare it to that? Point is, these two characters are so similar to Matt and Tanya that you hardly even notice the difference between them. Now, the same can't really be said for Harry being out of the picture and being replaced by Billy, because Billy and Harry are two distinctly different characters personality-wise. Harry definitely gives the impression of the warm grandfather type that can get a little angry at sometimes, while Billy gives much more of a father figure type of personality, the one who you know that you can go to whenever things get rough, and is generally more calm when he is approached with just about any circumstance, which is much healthier for a kids show. Not to mention, the show has been pretty consistent in keeping a similar tone to that first season. Not really changing a whole lot on how the show really works thematically and structurally. Although there are significantly less viewing machine segments and musical segments outside of the jukebox band. But overall, I would say that Season 2 of Shiny Time Station is more of the same, more or less. We definitely get to see a lot more side characters and recurring side characters compared to the first season. Definitely making the world of Shiny Time Station, for lack of a better word, shine more compared to Season 1. Although I will admit, whenever they decide to include Season 1 episodes of Thomas and Friends for the Thomas segments, especially later on in Season 2, it is definitely distracting, to say the least, because for me, I saw these episodes years ago and suddenly here they are. But that's more of me thing. Plus, it's just kind of weird that they're using them when they still have all of Season 3 at their disposal that they can just use already. But regardless, Season 2, still a very strong season of children's television. And with that, we are officially done with our discussion of Shining Time Station Season 2, and tomorrow we shall be moving on to Thomas and Friends Season 4. Now, this season is going to be a very interesting season because it is technically the end of an era, but not really. And when I say that it's the end of an era, I mean that this is going to be the very last time we will hear George Carlin as the narrator for Thomas and Friends, because this was indeed the last season he dubbed over episodes for the show. And this will also be the final season to feature episodes that are directly based off of stories written by the Reverend W. Awdry. So this is definitely going to be a pretty big season. Not to mention, a ton of new engines have been introduced in Season 4, so the train count this season is going to be very special. That will all be happening tomorrow. I would just like to thank you guys for joining me for Shining Time Station Season 2 for the entirety of September this year thus far. It's been an absolute blast to do this again. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified on when future Steam Timber videos will be uploaded. But until then, I will see you later. Bye!